Hello. So we have a couple of students who are more more late into their PhD journey. So Anthony has graduated, Johnson has completed his MPhil, Andy, who will speak later, also completed his PhD and is now working, and Chunman is at the later stage of his PhD journey as well. But so Chunman is studying philosophy, and Andy, who will speak later, was doing climate science at University of Cambridge. So in this rather short panel discussion, maybe let's focus on two questions, maybe and we can discuss about it. So the first question might be, so Anthony, you mentioned that during your PhD, you put a lot of focus in doing other things as well. Mm-hmm. So do you think doing PhD in general, maybe your pressure from your peers or from your boss, do you find it hard to actually find time to do these other things, or do you find it is actually helping you to your PhD by doing other stuff?
Yeah, thank you, Alex. I apart from my PhD study, I involved in a lot of clubs, photography clubs and sports clubs like Tai Chi, and I started the Scholars Association. So I did spend much time on developing these activities. But at the same time, in the daytime, I spend most of my time and effort, my focus on research. And then it's like a double life. So in the daytime, I do my research, and in the nighttime or weekends, I do all these activities. But I find these activities, research and extracurricular activities, they are balanced. So not just doing research, but all these activities would maintain my good connection with different people in Oxford, in the university as well. So if you are doing your research solely, you will only meet people in the lab or in the lecture halls. But I go outside the labs and see people maybe from the humanity departments or psychology, and I meet friends even from different departments or even from different cities. So I find these are the important aspects of doing a PhD. So not just study, but both.
I see. I see. So, yeah, thanks for sharing your part about your extracurricular life, so to say.
Yes. I'd like to introduce and ask Juman a little bit of some questions. I wonder if any of you actually recognize him, because he's not only is he doing his PhD study now, but he's also quite involved in a lot of advocacy, educational platform in philosophy, and he's part of the Facebook blog called 號青年荼毒室, and he also went on TV for quite some time now. And my question is, how do you manage to fit all these other educational or advocacy work with your research, and do they complement well, or do they contradict each other and things like that?
Well, that's why I haven't graduated. So, no, it's kidding. So I think it's not mutual exclusive. I think, well, actually that's the content of my sharing later on, but I can talk about it at this moment. I mean, well, I think it's not mutually exclusive, because when you stay in the Eiffel Tower for too long, you will kind of get disconnect with the real world, and then you will feel like, well, what I am doing here, because you are writing something no one gonna read it, except your supervisor or the examiner. You don't know why you have to invest so much into something which is not really rewarding to you. You cannot really get to know what the point of my thesis, what it helped the society, how it improved the world. You cannot really get this answer really quick, because it's a long-term impact. I believe that somehow the thing come back and get some influence in the society, but it's in the long term, not a short-term, immediate influence. So when I'm doing those 不務正業 things, then I will get a immediate rewarding sense. Because when I when I have a public talk with the audience asks me some philosophy question, and then they say, oh, I help them a lot and blah, blah, blah. And then you can get a sense that, oh, what I'm studying is really useful to the society. So it kind of come back to my research. It kind of motivate myself to get back to read more, because sometimes you think, no, I'm not really knowledgeable to kind of educate the public and the layman. You are not enough. So you want to improve yourself in order to better encounter the audience. So the extracurricular activities kind of motivate my research. So for one thing, it kind of gives me a relief from my research in the Eiffel Tower, and also for another, it motivates myself to improve in academic context.
Okay. Thanks. We certainly look forward to hearing more about during your talk. So for the other two speakers, Andy and Johnson, do you feel like you have other extracurricular activities during your PhD which complement your study, or maybe the other way, contradict it or distracted you from doing real work?
Again, I don't think I can talk about like my extracurricular activities in PhD, because
MPhil.
yeah, MPhil. So again, like I think there's an international differences like that I observe. Like in the United States, like what I heard from my friends doing PhD or research, like the workload is just overwhelming. Like they are working overnight every day, so there's very little time for like extracurricular activities. But like at the same time in UK, as I said, like there's so much free time you can like dispose on your own. And I joined the college basketball team like when I did my MPhil in Cambridge, and basically half of the team was PhD. They were doing PhD. So I think like in UK, like the conflict between doing a PhD or doing research and doing all the other stuff is like relatively less. And that's why I also participated in a lot of like other activities, like joining the 180-degree consulting as a student consultant, and like doing the basketball team stuff, and also joining the Bowls Club stuff. So I think, yeah, as long as you can manage your time well and to fit yourself into a tight research schedule, then it's fine.
So I did my MPhil and PhD at Cambridge. I think the biggest difference was in MPhil we got very tight lectures timetable. So every day I know which lecture I go. But for PhD, we have no timetable at all. So as Johnson said, I try to plan what I need to do every day. But at the start of my PhD, I have no clue what I have to do every day in the first term. No timetable at all. Supervisor won't call you up to the office. You manage your own life. So it was a challenge at first, especially when your research topic was not completely defined yet, because you still have to explore. It usually took a few months because you still have to read a lot of literature review. But I'm a guy that likes to have fun, so I was quite distracted by a lot of gatherings from societies, karaoke, having dinners with friends. And also, because rowing in Oxbridge is quite famous, so I also joined. And it was crazy because the time you have to be at the river at 6 in the morning, and they row for 3 hours. So you finish at around 9, and I was so exhausted. So that also had a bit of a challenge in my PhD life at first, but I managed. So I think for PhD, you have to know time management. This is a boring term, but you must manage your time well, even if you like to work overnight. But get sleep, but go hard or go home.
Hello. Thank you very much. I think another question that I'd like to ask, because all of you come from various backgrounds, I think what we really want to know is what are the specific barriers that you face because of the nature of your research. I understand that some might be doing a lot of laboratory work. Meanwhile, philosophy, people jokes that they just need pen and paper. And sociology or economics would require some other kinds of skills. So what would be some very specific barriers about your research area that pose like the greatest challenge during your PhD journey?
So maybe I'll start with myself first. And I'm kind of a theoretical person, so I work on theory, like economic theory, sociological theory. And the difference between doing theory and doing empirical research is that when you do empirical research, either quantitative or qualitative, you always get a result. Like if you do a regression, it may be positive or negative, it may be significant or insignificant, but you are gonna get a result. But like doing theory is quite different because you have some simple idea, but the most difficult part is to engage the literature. Like there's a lot of voices against your arguments in the literature. You have to engage all of them, and you have to build arguments to defend your idea. And there's a huge amount of uncertainty right there. You don't know if there's a result waiting for you out there. Maybe you try very hard, but at the end you can't really build a sound argument to defend it. So you don't know whether you would really get a meaningful result. And yeah, at the end of the day, maybe you're wrong and they're right? So it's like making a mathematical proof. You don't know where to start, and you don't know like whether it would end in a proper way. So that's why I think like particularly for like people doing research on theory, like passion is very important. Because I like a quote by Steve Jobs saying that like it's sort of like passion is so important for entrepreneurship because it's so difficult that any rational person would give up. So it's sort of like applying the same to research. Like doing theoretical research, you don't know whether you would get a meaningful result. So if you're rational, you may actually give up at some point. So having a passion is a very important thing for you to move on this research journey.
Maybe I would like to talk about being a life scientist, immunologist, studying in a group of medical doctors. So my supervisor is a dermatologist, and 7 or 8 out of the 10 students he have are medical doctors. So I'm one of the two of the biochemists by training. So during the group meetings, there's talking about clinical practices and using medical terms that I don't understand at first. So keeping up is a very difficult challenge for me to understand their terms. And so I tried. So my project is try to use more biochemistry or scientific mechanisms way to understand skin diseases. But my peers are doing, they are medical doctors, and they try to use a more clinical approaches. They study clinical cases. So in fact, we are doing different, we have different approaches on the same topic, skin diseases. So I'm doing more lab work, and they are doing more clinical cases. So my specific challenge is that during group meetings, we don't actually understand each other very much. So they talk about clinical cases. I can't picture how they meet the patients. And when I'm talking about chemical pathways, how these cells interact, and they ask a lot of questions that I assume they would know already by doing immunology. So the communication between different specialties is a major challenge to me when I was doing a PhD. So embrace these differences is a very major, is a way for better communication within the group. So for life science students who want to do a PhD in a group for medical doctors, I think this is a good advice to see this challenge before you apply for a PhD.
For me, when I first heard your question, only one word come up to my mind is loneliness. Yeah, that's true. I mean, I don't know if this is the case in science, natural science. I mean, in humanities, I always feel like I'm the only one struggling about my thesis and about the argument. No one, even God, can help you. I mean, for example, just like what has said, no timetables, no schedule, no planning, everything is on your own. So, especially in my case, my supervisor is busy enough, and every day I just walk to the library, swallowed by the ocean of books, and then struggling. And I have no idea where I'm going, where I'm heading to. So you have to endure the loneliness of the whole enterprise, of the whole inquiry. So I don't know if it's the case in science. I mean, they can go to the lab and then kind of, I don't know, work together in certain sense in the lab. But for me, I just stay in the library every day, every day, every day. Didn't talk to anyone. And then just reading the books. Keep thinking on your own. So it's really lonely enterprise. And for me, it's a special case because I'm doing Chinese philosophy in Oxford. And I'm pretty sure that I'm the only one in Oxford doing this kind of stuff. Except my supervisor, and he's so busy. So that's why I say you have to endure the loneliness if you really want to pursue. So what I admire most about the past scholar or great people or great philosopher is not only their intellectual ability, but their endurance to survive during the whole journey. Yeah, so that's the most important.
Absolutely agree. Cannot agree more. I'm not sure if it is a good question to ask because it seems like we are just saying don't do PhD anymore. Yeah,
it's about ups and downs.
Yeah. So my project was also on my own, just facing a computer screen, doing coding all the time. So it was also a lonely project. And I once stuck on a code of line for a few days just because actually I missed a bracket in a line of code. So it was a nightmare sometimes. And the second thing I can think of is as a PhD, I think for most of the PhD, sometimes you thought you find some new results to the world, and then suddenly you saw from Google that somebody has done it already. Yeah, don't quote it in the thesis. Yeah, so the world is very quick. So sometimes big ideas, especially if you are doing it in some very hot topic, it's very competitive. So sometimes the down is that you just see a sea of results that you just did. Yeah, so you just have to explore and ask your supervisor.
Okay, cool. So we have quite a good discussion about ups and downs. Although in retrospect, I think we should put the downs part at first and put more uplifting message at the end. But anyway, thanks for sharing by the four of you, and we certainly look forward to the talks by Chunman and Andy later on after the break. So now we have about a 20-minute break outside, and there will be coffee and tea and soft drinks, and also plenty of sandwiches if you feel hungry, because we start rather early. So I'll see you guys about 4:05 maybe. Thank you.